Listen, a huge thanks to everyone for taking the time to join us here today. My name is Darragh Ryder. I'm CEO of AHEAD. AHEAD are an NGO focused on creating inclusive environments in education and employment for people with disabilities, and a large focus of our work is also focused on promoting the principles of universal design for learning, which is of course a framework that is about making teaching and learning better for everybody. And I'm here today with my colleague Lisa Padden from Access and Lifelong Learning UCD, who are a very close partner of AHEAD in this project, and my colleague Trevor Boland from AHEAD, who's our digital badge wizard and our assistive technology wizard here in AHEAD. And we're also joined by Dr. Frida Brown from UCD, who's going to give her reflections later on about her own experiences of undertaking the badge as a participant. I'd like to also mention, I suppose, that the badge is a initiative that's coordinated by the National Forum in terms of the badge that's actually received at the end is accredited by the National Forum, so they're very important stakeholders in this project. And also just to say a huge thanks from the AHEAD perspective to our funders, the Higher Education Authority, who fund our higher education activities, and SOLAS, who fund the further education activities of AHEAD as well. Just to say a few bits of housekeeping before we start, to note that the closed captions are available for this session, so if you'd like a live transcript of everything that everyone's saying, we have our wonderful captioner, Michelle, in the house, who's providing closed captions, and you can get them at the bottom of your window by just clicking the CC button down below. In terms of how you can engage with us here today, so the chat function is for kind of commentary and chat between yourselves as attendees. And if you have a specific question that's for the panelists here today, you can use the Q&A box. So that's the ones we'll be keeping a closer eye on with regards to questions. And we're going to answer them as we go throughout. If a question is arising that's appropriate, but we may keep some of them for later on, so don't panic if yours isn't answered straight away. Trevor, could you maybe just move us along a little bit?
Yeah.
Actually, just before we go into that, I suppose to give some context on the badge. Yeah, the badge started, I think it was 2017. Lisa might correct me if I'm wrong in there, but I think it was 2017 we did our first iteration of the badge. And as I said, it's a co-development of AHEAD and UCD Access and Lifelong Learning delivered through the forum. So it's been this wonderful experience of initially starting as a very, very small thing, rising into a much, much bigger deal. And I suppose what happened is initially it was just AHEAD and UCD who used to roll out this badge together, so we would only really be able to reach maybe 30, 40, 50 people at max in any one iteration. But over the course of, I suppose, the pandemic last year, and also just the way that we've developed the badge out, what we've actually run into now is a kind of model that's much more collaborative, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I just wanted to say a huge shout out if there's any of our previous badge participants or peer group facilitators in the room who might be collaborating with us on this project this year. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. So I suppose before we get started, we're just going to start with a little poll to ask you where you're coming from in terms of your level of experience with UDL. So Trevor, do you maybe launch that poll? Would that be possible?
Yeah.
Really, this is just trying to figure out in the realm, where you're at. Are you starting on your UDL journey? Are you midway there, or are you a UDL pro? And often in the UDL badge course, we get a real mix of all of these levels coming in, which actually adds a great kind of spice to the course, I think, and to the peer-to-peer engagements, which you're going to learn about now. So I suppose I'm going to introduce my colleague as well. Trevor is going to sort of take charge of the next part of the session. How are you, Trevor?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks a lot for coming along. See all the voting has come in, so like pure good Eurovision style, I shall display the voting. So I'll share the results. And so to the question, what is your level of experience with UDL in your teaching and learning practice? Actually 5% said very familiar, so thank you, 5%. Fairly familiar with UDL, already 36%, and that's incredible. Actually, we love it because then you've kind of come in with a flavor of UDL, maybe even a few ideas even, or you've witnessed other people bring it in. And then not familiar at all with UDL is 59. And I think you're in the perfect course, because I think in this one, we kind of take you through UDL step by step over the 10 weeks of our course. So I think that's...
Yeah, and you also get a great opportunity, I think, in the course. And again, we'll flesh that out more for you later, but to interact with other peers, maybe at the same level you, but also maybe others who've a little bit further down the road. So that's really rich interactions that you can get on this course, and I suppose it's a way to kind of a guided way into UDL, which can sometimes be a scary topic to approach if you're coming at it with no knowledge at all. So Trevor, I'm going to hand over to you.
So first of all, another big welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for attending the session. So I'm guessing most people who are here today probably are in teaching roles. So the UDL badge is for you, and for those not in teaching roles, you're equally as welcome, because there might be teaching-like components to how you work in your own practice. So the UDL badge is for those who are based in Ireland, teaching and working in tertiary education, specifically in Ireland itself, and that's all inclusive of like the further and higher education sector. So if you teach or have a teaching-like dimension to your role, this can be looked at really broadly in terms of the course, and it's an essential component to the course, as there is an assignment at the end that we ask you to kind of document about how you brought in aspects of UDL into your own practice. And that assignment itself is a good way to you to bring in your learning about UDL, and also to share your learning with UDL, as this peer group who you're going to be associated with, like a group of 5 people, you'll be talking throughout and kind of sharing ideas, as well as, you know, we'll be guiding you through this as well. So if you have specific questions about kind of the UDL course at all, feel free to use the Q&A box below, and we'll answer those throughout.
Can I just say on this one, Trevor, if you don't mind, just back one slide. Yeah, so just to highlight that piece around, it's available to those who teach in any further education or higher education program in the Republic of Ireland. So it's probably important to say that, and it's also important to say that that's a national forum standard. So the badge is actually part of an ecosystem of badges around professional development in teaching and learning that comes from the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning, which is you know, a body focused on promoting excellence in teaching and learning in Ireland. So that's the kind of the rule around accreditation, is that it can only go to those in the Republic of Ireland. And in terms of the definition of people who teach, yes, it's really about like what you have to do in the course is actually redesign a learning interaction. So yes, when we say looking at a broad definition, we welcome people in other support roles, and it's about redesigning that interaction between you and the student. So that could be, for example, you know, if you take a broad definition, that could be, for example, a guidance role, you know, maybe how you design your guidance interactions, could be like a librarian role, but you have to be kind of prepared to come into it with that viewpoint and take a broad definition of that if you're going to come onto the course in one of those roles, I think.
So this kind of report that you're going to do on this redesign activity, you know, is a big part of the course itself, and throughout the course there'll be opportunities within the written assignment that you're going to be offered a chance to reflect on the diversity of the students in your own institution. Second of all, even to, you know, to kind of gain that kind of foundation of learning about universal design itself. And again, there's components or modules within the course where we split up and the sections even to include like an introduction to UDL. So if you're new to UDL, we kind of guide you through that. And then there's 3 other sections then that guide you through the specific principles as well. So like we do kind of ease you into that whole UDL process as well. And the good news is that the written assignment then throughout is a great way then to express that kind of deepening knowledge and that understanding of UDL that you've gleaned, as the assignment itself is between 800 to 1200 words long. So it's not like a huge thesis amount of knowledge. So we really do ask you to be like succinct in how you kind of express that way that you've implemented UDL into your own practice. And within this redesign, we just ask you, kind of like what I was saying about kind of thinking about just bringing in some of the elements of UDL, as maybe every year we kind of get to see people trying to take on all the UDL components into their redesign, and that can be kind of a huge task. And in the long term of your own kind of exploration of UDL, that will be amazing kind of for you to explore. But for the purpose of this 10-week long course, it's really like a way of kind of dipping into that kind of fantastic knowledge of UDL and exploring it in your own specific context. And then And then there's also an alternative. So rather than just submitting an 800 to 1200 word assignment, there's also the choice of a 5 to 10 minute long video where you can also just document those key findings as well. And we have like a template available where we basically ask you to look at this specific template. So what I can do is like I can share that within the chat. There's a bit.ly link that I'm putting in. So if you're familiar with bit.ly links, you just copy the part from bit.ly and post it into your browser, and then it should give you access to the UDL activity, which is a great way of just seeing the expectations of what you're doing. And then I think that's it really in terms of the learning objectives, because one of the things I think is great is like it's incredibly supportive. And like that, there's information within the course itself that guides you. And then with your peers, that group of 5 people, they are incredibly supportive as you meet them throughout the beginning to the end of the course as well. So if anyone else wants to add anything to that, kind of feel free, Dara or Lisa.
No, I think you've covered the learning objectives there. Oh, sorry, Lisa, go on, you got. You got.
I was going to say you covered it. I was agreeing with you there.
Okay. And then for the next slide, so just some key facts about the course. So all we ask in the course is to commit about 25 hours to the course, which, you know, over the space of the 10 weeks isn't a huge amount of time. So basically breaks down to 2.5 hours a week. And this 10-week course, it's all online. So as Dara was saying, it's designed in partnership with UCD and the National PD framework, that's Teaching and Learning Forum. And within this, then there's 5 modules where we kind of guide you step by step through what UDL is. And that provides you with the flexibility of really thinking about how you build UDL into your own context. So the good thing about UDL, it's not prescriptive. So it allows you lots of flexibility to think about it in all kinds of ways into how you work and how you interact with like students. So a minimum of 4 peer group meetings is required. And as I was saying earlier, this happens from the beginning to the end of the course, these kind of meetings. And at the end of the course, this peer group of approximately 5 people play a specific role in terms of how you view each other's work. So you actually peer review each other's work. And in a very light touch way, you give feedback about how to just maybe improve or tweak the assignment as well. And this then kind of all leads into that final submission of your assignment. And then throughout, there's 3 webinars where again, we kind of guide you through some of the aspects of UDL. And within these webinars, there's opportunities just to ask questions. Questions might arise throughout the course. You might have just a number of queries about how to access things, where to go for information, and that's perfectly fine. And we help you in any way, shape or form with those kind of queries. And then, so those webinars also, they are recorded as well. So if you can attend those live, that's amazing. If you can't, that's okay too. We make those recordings available, I think it's even within the next day of the sessions. So again, you can view those at your own time in the course. So it's really flexible. And then, you know, throughout that assignment, which is kind of the key goal really to kind of capture that kind of growing knowledge of UDL, is like only 800 to 1200 words long. And the video that you can create as an alternative is only 5 to 10 minutes long. So again, really manageable in terms of like a 10-week course. And as well as kind of all this to gain the badge for UDL, there's the option for a UDL badge facilitator, option 2, and then there's a short assignment, which is approximately 5 hours. And this particular aspect of the course is something that you choose to do of your own time. So within the course, you can choose to start that, and then you merely just submit it at the end. So you don't need to kind of click a box or, you know, opt specifically and to do it. You can just do it at your own time and in your own pace. And all the resources that we kind of make available throughout the course, we actually kind of share all these resources with you as well. So there's lots of flexibility then for you to kind of consider, maybe even thinking of rolling out the UDL badge course yourself in your own kind of workplace or work environment. And again, it's just incredible. Yeah, we've seen so many people really gain so much from the course. So I will hand this over now to, is it Dara or Lisa?
Lisa up next.
Okay, there you go.
Great. So
Can I just say, actually, Lisa, sorry, before you go, just say there's loads of people asking about the recording and stuff. So just to say that this session is fully recorded, and also it will be captioned, so everybody will receive a captioned recording. So don't worry about missing too much or furiously scribbling notes. You'll be able to look back if you do want. And we're monitoring the questions here coming up, and there's lots that we'll jump in on in time. So some of it's already going to be covered in the session ahead. So we'll pull back on some.
thanks, Sarah. So in terms of your peer groups, and Trevor's mentioned this already, so when you register for the course, you're going to be linked up with 4 other participants. So you'll be in a group of 5, or most of you will be in a group of 5, and you're going to work together with those peers throughout the badge. So that peer engagement piece really helps to deepen your learning, deepen your understanding of universal design for learning. It helps you to understand, I suppose, your own context and the context that other people are working in as well in terms of higher and further education. Those meetings that you'll have, and there's 4 that we'll ask you to schedule, you'll schedule them at a time that suits your group. So again, more flexibility in the course in terms of making sure that you can work around everybody's commitments, because obviously people's timetables will be different. So you'll schedule those meetings, and we have provided you then with some guided discussion points to help with those meetings. So in every meeting, you might be talking about 3 or 4 different points, and we'll ask you to do a little bit of preparation for those. So for example, for the first peer group meeting, you might be talking to each other about your own context. So we ask you to have a look and see if you can find, we'll say, the data on diversity of the student population where you work. And that's what you'll be talking about. You'll be talking about your own context, but we have those guided discussion points really to assist with those meetings. And in the meetings, as Trevor said, you're going to brainstorm with each other, you'll support each other throughout the process, and you'll do some verification of each other's engagement with UDL. So absolutely not kind of assessment, but very much a kind of light touch verification that you've engaged with each other and with the UDL course. And I have to say, in terms of the peer groups, every year the feedback we get, or that we've gotten, is that the peer group is really one of the most valuable pieces of the badge in terms of people being able to stay in touch with each other, the learning that you get from each other. I really don't think we can kind of overestimate the importance of the peer groups in terms of your learning process. So it's very, very important that when you sign up, you know that you're going to engage with that group throughout the badge. So you can move to the next slide, Trevor. So as part of our process then, we have some really important people who are called peer group facilitators, and I know some of them are here with us in the session today. So this graphic here, which I think Dara developed, shows you the structure of the course. So we have the course coordinators, which is UCD and FET, and we're supported obviously by the National Forum, as Dara said. And then within each institution, we'll have hopefully at least 1 peer group facilitator, if not more, institution or ETB, university, college, whatever it is. So your peer group facilitator will introduce you to your peer group, and they'll be in touch with you throughout the course. So they'll be your first point of contact if you have any questions or queries, but you'll also be supported by us as course coordinators. So you'll get a weekly email from us to tell you, where you should be in the course at that particular time. But you will also hear from your peer group facilitator. We have, I looked this morning, over 40 peer group facilitators signed up to work with us on the facilitation of the next national rollout, which is fantastic. And it's the peer group facilitators who allow us to have as many participants as we do on the badge. So they are absolutely key in terms of your experience on the badge and our ability to roll out the badge nationally as well. So as I said, they'll be in touch with you, they'll introduce you to your group, and you'll be able to be in touch with them throughout. And you'll have an opportunity to do the facilitator badge, as Trevor said. So that will allow you then maybe to consider being a peer group facilitator in the future. So we're really trying to increase the ripple effect of UDL and the facilitation piece as well. So do you move to the next slide for me, Trevor? Perfect. And this is just a reiteration of what Trevor said earlier. In terms of your implementation, you'll have that redesign activity report, and this is an example of one of the pieces from the report that you'll write up. The majority of your time will be spent engaging with UDL, thinking about UDL, so doing your reflection and then actually implementing UDL. The report is really just the piece that you write up at the end or the video that you make at the end. It isn't something that takes a large amount of time. It's really just where you're documenting what you've done, as much for yourself as for us as the coordinators and facilitators. Did you want to come in there, Dara?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's important. I'd highlight the word activity rather than assignments, because this is very light touch. What we want is, our goal is to get as many people engaging with UDL, engaging with the framework, and taking time to reflect against the framework with their peers in the peer groups, brainstorming together and building their understanding about UDL together. So it's very light touch. It's not something that's going to be, someone's going to be coming over and tell you that you're doing UDL wrong. That's not what this is about, and that's why we tried to make the report templates and if you take the video options, very simple and straightforward.
Will you move to the next slide for me there, Trevor? So one of the ways that we're going to support you throughout the badge is through drop-in sessions. So the drop-in sessions, and I've just noticed a mistake on the slide, are going to be 1 to 2 on Mondays in weeks 5 to 9 of the badge, not Thursdays as it was last time. That was my fault. So you can come to the drop-in session, ask anything about Universal Design for Learning. You'll meet us as the course coordinators, but you'll also meet your peer group facilitators there as well. And you'll be able to, as I said, ask any questions that you have. Usually what people do in those sessions is kind of bounce ideas for the redesign, check that you're doing enough, and we go, you're doing too much. You need to do something more manageable. That's almost every conversation that we have in the drop-in. But we'll be there for you, as I say, during those redesign weeks from 5 to 9. I think I'm handing back to Dara now at this stage for the next slide.
There's just a few questions actually before we go past the actual kind of bit of the course that might be relevant here. First of all, one is the delivery live online? So the way the way the course works is that we deliver it as flexibly as is humanly possible for you over the 10 weeks. So what happens is we have 3 live webinars, but they're also recorded and made available asynchronously. Each of the online modules has to be undertaken within a specific week, but at any time within that week. So it's a self-directed module that you can access anytime. Those modules are kind of guided multimedia kind of pathways through, analysing the principles and so forth. And then with regards to the peer groups, they're scheduled by the peer groups themselves. So we set up, for example, discussion points for each group, and they're supposed to happen roughly at a particular time in the course. But you use that to manage your own schedules as a group, and it's part of your responsibility to be within that group, to be sort of supportive to each other in finding a good time and a place for those things to happen. The second question is around the schedule. Is the schedule available now? I think we're actually going to summarize some key dates now, but if I'm not mistaken, guys, the kind of full schedule of dates is on the website already, or if it's not, we can make it available very soon, but not sure if it's on the webpage already.
Some of the dates are available on the information session website in the head site, but there's just a few final dates to confirm. But a lot of them are there. But I think on one of the slides coming up, I think there's more information about dates.
Yeah, so all of the key dates are already available. The key sort of live engagements that you might want to consider are already available. I have a few questions around around UDL, the nature of UDL itself. We might kind of recap and come back to that at the end and just give a brief explain of our own reflections on what UDL is and how it can help. I think Patrick has also asked a specific question about UDL, so we'll come back to those a little bit later. And so there's another one around the redesign activity. So Mary has asked, can the redesign be a design of a new module or teaching element? That's a really important question actually, about what to select as your starting point. So again, to make this course manageable, what we ask is that we don't want someone to redesign their whole program. That's not going to be possible in 10 weeks. Rather, we ask them to select a teaching activity, and there's a very broad definition of what that can be. So it could be a single module or a group of related modules, or it could be even something as simple as the design of your learning management system course homepage. It could be the redesign of an assessment. Does anybody else want to come in there? Is there anything else?
Yes, I think if you do your self-reflection as part of the course, that will help you to guide, what you're going to pick for your redesign. So I think you don't have to go into the course, and I'd encourage you not to go into the course already having decided what you're going to redesign. So, follow the course as it is. You'll do a deep self-reflection, and that will give you some really good ideas as to where to start for your redesign. Because obviously what you do as part of the badge will just be the start of your UDL journey, which you'll continue on. Hopefully we think for as long as you're teaching. But yeah, so you don't need to know now what you're going to redesign. You just need to know that you have some teaching activity between week 5 and 11, 5 and 9.
Absolutely, and I suppose go further to say to make again as easy as possible to get started on your UDL journey. We introduce an approach to the application of UDL called the +1 approach, which is about adding single added options for learners to engage with material in a different way at the biggest point of need. So identifying roadblocks in your course where there's maybe difficulties. You notice that there's a lot of questions, or a lot more questions than other elements of your course, a lot more maybe complaints or concerns from students. That's a really good place to start with the implementation of UDL. So I think we can probably move on and circle back on those final questions later. So next, just one there, Trevor, about the facilitators badge, if you don't mind. So the facilitators badge, Lisa kind of highlighted there the model that we use to roll out this course. It's not that we are the only people who can roll out this course. In fact, all of the materials in this course are freely available under Creative Commons. And that means anybody can actually take them and use them in whatever way they want. But to actually be able to go and roll it out to your colleagues yourself and actually have the power to issue badges yourself, that's a possibility for you to do that. But you need to gain the facilitators badge accreditation to undertake that. And all of the same rules apply. You can only roll it out to colleagues who, if you want to issue the badges, you can only roll it out to colleagues who are in the Republic of Ireland in further and higher education sector. But I have to say there is some other people in the room here today who are from, I noticed, from other countries or maybe from other sectors. And that's a question that's come in actually around someone who's not working further on higher ed. So what I'd say to that person is, unfortunately, you can't take the national rollout of the badge, but what you can do is engage and have a look at the materials, which are all freely available under Creative Commons. So in terms of the facilitators badge, what happens is as you come through the course, you can make a decision whether you want to take this 5-hour add-on course to become an accredited facilitator. And what that is really that you have to engage in a webinar, which kind of explains the role of the facilitator. You have to go in and actually unpack the facilitators pack, which is where all the learning materials are and the instructions about how to roll out the course. And you complete an exercise in which you actually plan a mock facilitation for yourself for next year. So you create a plan on how to roll out the course. So that's a 5-hour add-on. As I said, it's totally optional, and it's not something you have to commit to at the beginning of the course either. It's actually something you just buy into in the course, and basically the only way we know that you've engaged with it is when we receive your final activity and the verification at the end. So it's very kind of light touch. You can do it as you go along. You can even have a look at it if you want as you begin the course. Have a look at the materials and decide, actually, no, that's not for me. I'm going to step back from that, and I'm not going to be able to engage with that. But we really encourage people, if they are interested in becoming part of the community that's helping to spread the ideas of UDL, that they would engage. And I suppose that gives them the option later down the line that if they want to participate, for example, like others are in this national rollout with us, that they have the option to do that next year, because it's a great network building, great community building, and it's also a really nice way to get involved in sort of the UDL, for want of a better word, advocacy piece, the piece around sharing it. And so if you want to move on there, Trevor, we might just... So how do you actually sign up? The important thing. Well, the first thing to say is that the sign up is not yet open, so it's going to open in the middle of August, and we'll get more dates on that shortly. But what you can do for now, if you're interested, and the most important thing to do is actually to register your interest. And what that means is you fill in an expression of interest form, and that means you'll be the first people to know when the badge registration goes live. Trevor is posting that link into the chat box now, but it's also available on the UDL badge page where you would have signed up for this session as well. So if you go there, sign up, what that means is that you'll be the first people to know. So what happens then in August is that you'll receive an email either from ourselves directly or via your peer group facilitator if there is one in your institution. So many higher education institutions and further education Education and Training Board regions have facilitators already trained who are participating, who are amongst that group of 41 that Lisa said have already signed up. In that case, you may get an email direct from them to sign up, and you can sign up from either route, it doesn't matter. But basically what happens, you commit your registration at that stage and you give us your details, and that's it. It's pretty straightforward. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Trevor? I should highlight as well that the course is totally free for everybody who who is in further and higher education in the Republic of Ireland. So that's part of the deal. There's no sign-up cost. In terms of the key dates, the local registration will open on August 16th. And when I say local, that means if you have a peer group facilitator, you may receive an email direct from them around August 16th inviting you to participate. The national registration is where it becomes available to anybody in the sectors to openly sign up. Happens on August 23rd. The registration then closes on September 21st. So that's your final date for possible registration on the badge. The badge then starts a couple of weeks later on October 4th with an orientation webinar. And that's really where we sort of locate yourself within the course and tell you how to proceed and where you're going. So basically, in the only other contact that happens, I suppose, before that really is that you'll be contacted by your peer group facilitator to actually engage with your peer group to start planning your dates and introduce you to your colleagues that you're going to be working with throughout the course. And you'll also get some basic information around us, so you can actually log in and explore the learning platform before that first webinar happens. You'll then see on October 21st, webinar 2 happens, and that's the second live webinar. Remember, these webinars are all kind of orientation in nature. They tell you what's happening, what's coming up in the next phase of the course, and what you have to achieve over the next phase of the course. In weeks 5 to 9, then, this is the key part of the course where you're actually doing the redesign activity. So if you like, you do a lot of the learning about UDL, the initial learning about the concepts, the principles, the guidelines that are involved in UDL in the first 4 weeks. And then in weeks 5 to 9, you're actually doing the key bit where you redesign and you implement UDL in your own practice. And so during those times, we have these weekly drop-ins, which are just available to come and seek advice from both ourselves as course coordinators, but also the peer group facilitators. Many of them will be taking part in those sessions, and that's a one-to-one kind of drop-in, so you can get a really tight-knit conversation for someone who's already been down the line and done UDL implementations themselves and get advice or a sounding board for those. Webinar 3 then takes place on December 6th, and webinar 12 is the close of the course, and that's the time when you have to submit your redesign activity. And if you're taking the facilitator's badge, also the facilitator's activity at that point as well. You can move along there, Trevor. So I suppose we're going to double back. What we might do just before we introduce Frida actually is because there was a few general questions about UDL. So it might be good to frame UDL before Frida comes in with her own reflections on, I suppose, undertaking the course herself. So somebody asked a very basic question, which we should probably think about doing these information session first, is can you summarize what UDL is? So I suppose what UDL is it comes from the principle, the ideas of universal design, which are ideas in the built environment and in the digital environment. And the concept of universal design is to make environments and services as usable as possible to the greatest extent possible by all people without the need for adaptation. So if you think about it, it's a very, very broad concept, but in general principle, it's about building in accessibility, about flexibility, choice, so that everybody has a chance to use an environment or a service. So when we take those concepts and move them into teaching and learning, we get UDL, which is a very specific framework for teaching and learning that's built on neuroscience and the learning sciences. And that was developed by a US organization based out of Harvard called CAST in the 1990s, and it's been developed on ever since and updated accordingly as the new research in the learning sciences comes out. And that, I'm not going to get too much into it, but basically it involves 3 core principles, which are about providing multiple means of representation, which is how you represent knowledge, of engagement, which is kind of the why of learning, and what recruits your interest to learning and sustains your motivation for learning, and the multiple means of action and expression, which is all about how you demonstrate and express what you know. That's the whistle-stop tour of UDL. So if you're interested, I suppose, in building in more flexibility, accessibility, more student collaboration and voice, and more choice into your courses, then this is the place to come. Is there anything else, guys, you want to add to that?
No, I think it covers it. I mean, the real benefit of universal design for learning is that you're designing for everybody in the classroom. So if you've ever had that feeling that somebody's been left behind at the end of a semester, universal design for learning is a great work to start to use to really make sure that you've thought about all of your students and you're not designing to that average student, which doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Trevor, and actually, even there's so much rich information out there, even about UDL. And what I love about it is that even that information is expressed in a UDL kind of manner. There's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's websites. So if you begin to explore UDL, like even in that link that I sent a link to the CAST website as well. Like once you start to explore different types of information that's out there about it, that you'll find different types of ways to engage even with UDL itself. So there's a podcast that I really recommend called UDL in 15 minutes. And it's like an interview in 15 minutes with someone talking about UDL from a specific angle. Again, it's great if you're just at your desk and you're just trying to learn more about UDL, and then YouTube, as I said, is full of information about it, and you get kind of different angles on UDL. So it's a tremendous time now to explore UDL. There's so much information out there. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's a very specific framework with principles, guidelines, and checkpoints. So there's a lot of what I suppose it gives you a very clear map for you to kind of reflect on your own, a lens for you to reflect on your own learning through. But it's also kind of in a wider thing here really is how to engage with other educators and think about new ideas. And Patrick has asked specifically about he wants to use Moodle more and he wants to create multimodal content. Multimodal content, really, I suppose that's really all about the representation principle in UDL. So you're absolutely going to learn a lot about how to do that, or at least the concepts about how to approach it and why you would need to do it and how to go about it. So at this stage, I think it's a good time maybe to hand over to Dr. Frida Brown, who's just going to give us a little bit of a reflection as a past UDL badge participant about how she got on the course and how she found it.
Thanks very much, and Dara, and thanks for asking me to contribute to this session today. I suppose just to give a little bit of background about myself. So I'm a lecturer in the School of Nursing, Midwifery and Health Systems in UCD. And my school has a very strong tradition in the support of students with disability, particularly during clinical practice and clinical placements. And if anyone Googles the relationship between the School of Nursing and the head and Dr. Lisa Patton, you will see that we do have a strong tradition in it. But for me, my approach is different in that, and again, this is what Dara has said and Lisa has said already, is that UDL isn't just about providing access to students with disabilities, it's for all students, and to acknowledge and to recognise that we all learn differently. And very much my reflection of undertaking the digital badge will reflect how I've learned about how I learn myself, if that makes sense. So I was anxious to undertake the digital badge because my interest is in curriculum development in teaching and learning. And obviously there's quite a lot of attention, I suppose, in the media, and AHEAD and UCD for All have done a lot of work in highlighting UDL. So I wanted to know more about it. So the best way to do that was to go and to undertake the digital badge. I had a good knowledge of instructional design, and I have done some work in instructional design previously. So initially when I took the badge, I was like, yeah, I know all this already. But then when I started going through the online modules and doing my self-reflection, I realized I actually had a lot to learn and a lot of little changes that I can make that can have a huge impact for students. In doing the badge, so as has been said, it was 25 hours over the number of weeks. For me, it didn't suit me to do that online content in regular office hours. I tended to do that engagement at out of hours times, and that's what suited me. And that's because it's online and it's asynchronous, you can do that. And that's what worked with me in my working life and in my home life as well. And I found it very manageable to do it in that way. I found the reflective pieces really, really useful in it. And again, the content is delivered using the principles of UDL. So something I discovered about myself, for example, in the introduction module, the first time I did it, I just read through the slides and did a few activities. I didn't listen to, there's a YouTube clip in it, I didn't listen to it. I think maybe it was 20 minutes, I was tired. I said, yeah, sure, I've covered it in the clips. And then I went on to the second module and I was a little bit confused about something. So when I went back and redid the first module and I listened to the video content, it all suddenly made sense to me. So there was nothing new. And I can't remember, Dara, Trevor, you probably remember the name of the guy that talked about the neurodiversity.
David Rose, is it? Dr. David Rose?
Oh, yeah. And that was fantastic. So he didn't say anything different than had been done previously, but I really clicked with me then. So I suppose that's the whole concept of universal design, is that different actions, because people learn differently. So that was a great realization for me and a great reflection for me that actually I do need to be listening to these video clips. That's what I understand and that's what I can use better. So that was the involvement. Another element which I found really, really useful, and it's about action and expression, again, one of the UDL principles, is the peer groups. So my peer group were other faculty from within UCD. So I'm in the School of Nursing. Other members were from the School of English and Drama, School of Architecture. And I'd wonder, like, what have I in common, or how can I learn from someone who's in such a different environment or different school, different subject matter? But I learned so much from my peers, the discussion of how we can apply it, the discussion of how we can provide multiple means of action and expression. That was a hugely beneficial experience. And we were able to work our peer group meetings or peer group times. For us, it tended to fall quite often in the lunchtime period, just to suit our timetables and what worked with us. And it was really, really the peer group that I learned as much from as I did from going through the modules and from the questions posed to us in that peer group. And I found that a really, really positive element. I suppose another positive element of the peer group, when it came to writing up our redesigns, we have to verify each other's redesigns. For me, being with one of my peers who's in the School of English and Drama, I knew I had to write a good redesign project. And that's really important because it's about working with your peers and learning from your peers and developing from your peers as well. I suppose an example of one of the changes that I made, I teach on a postgraduate health professions education module, and students have to prepare a portfolio as part of that practice. And for the portfolio, they have to prepare some reflective pieces. So traditionally that would have been written reflective piece, but I was doing a UDL redesign. These are our future educators, future registered nurse tutors, lecturers in nursing in the future. So I wanted to introduce the principles of UDL. I wanted to get them to engage in it. So for one of their assessments, they were asked to do a creative reflection. The only guidelines they received is they had 10 minutes, they could not use PowerPoint. So the students produced amazing creative reflections for me. I had someone who did a table quiz. So that was a reflection on their learning experience. I have students who wrote poems. I had students who prepared like a video show with different music to reflect their emotions. And that was a wonderful experience. But what was most positive is when I asked students for feedback about it, they said to me, all right, so can I do this now for my students and for people I'm teaching? Can I get them to reflect creatively? I'm like, absolutely. That's the whole process for you and the whole thing about it. Another change I made since doing the badge was offering a choice of assessments on a third-year undergraduate module I teach, where students could write a 600-word written piece or do a presentation on it. I had 186 students registered to the module, and out of that, only 6 actually chose to do a presentation, and the other 180 chose to do a written piece. So I suppose that's something to be aware of as well, is that because offering students choice of assessment is different, they may not take it. So I think my learning from it is I need to encourage my students also to engage in alternative means of assessment. And I also did the facilitators badge at the time as well. And this year, since Christmas, I've worked with Dr. Lisa Padden in facilitating a group of my peers from UCD and a group of my peers from within the school on the digital badge journey as well. And that was a wonderful experience. And that was quite, I suppose that's an anxious time as well when you're facilitating your peers and they're determining whether you as a facilitator know actually about UDL yourself. But again, there was just some wonderful projects from it where what we found with faculty, and I know Lisa has said it already, was that once they became familiar with the principles of UDL, they wanted to take on huge, massive projects. But we had to encourage them just for the +1 because of the short time frame. And I just want to share one of the comments that one of my peers said at that, was that they already have a lot of good practices which they can associate with UDL, but by doing the badge, it gave them the language to articulate why they were making their choices in their delivery of content and their choices in assessment. And that stuck with me. I thought that was very, very strong. I still have a lot of changes to make in my theory, in my delivery of my content, and also in my assessments as well. But I am very much moving forward with that and still using the +1 approach. And I think there was some questions in the Q&A that I may have addressed by sharing some of my experiences with you. So I would say it's very, very manageable. Don't be concerned about writing your project up. It's just like any written piece. that you would have to do.
Thanks so much, Freda. That was lovely to hear your own experiences, and especially those that you're working with other colleagues as well. And Lisa, were you going to come in on something there?
No, I was just going to say thanks very much to Freda for that, and it was great to work with Freda on our local facilitation this year as well. It was fantastic to get more colleagues from the school and from elsewhere in UCD on board for UDL, and I think we're creating a ripple effect, and hopefully we'll have even more. And I know that we've got some colleagues from UCD here today as well, which is fantastic.
There's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of questions in the chat, which is great, or in the question and answer. But there's actually one specifically for Freda that jumped into the chat and said, so she's asked, how does your quality department react to creative assessments like table quizzes, poems, etc.? So it's that piece around the quality assurance and their I suppose take on UDL.
So from my perspective as a module coordinator, it's my responsibility to have my module descriptors. So once my assessment addresses my learning outcomes, I am in charge of, I suppose my responsibility as module coordinator to make sure that my assessment does fit and does achieve my module outcomes. So I have that ability and that flexibility to do that. But obviously, I suppose it's within a program context as well, that modules don't stand on their own. So very much the outcome that I would have set for that creative assessment would have tied in with my learning outcomes. So it would be the whole, I suppose, curriculum design and mapping process that I would have made sure. Does that answer the question, or have I gone too abstract?
Yeah, I think so. And just to chime in on it, yeah, no, absolutely. I think it does. And just to chime in on it, national bodies like QQI are fully behind UDL because it is actually a quality assured practice in and of itself. It's based on decades of research. If you go to the UDL guidelines, if you just Google them, each of the individual chapters is underpinned by a huge range of research, and you can see the research backing and evidence there. So it is actually a quality practice in and of himself, but it is really important, as Freda said, to link your learning outcomes to your assessment methods and ensure that if you are providing choice, you're providing equity in that choice for the two type of students who will choose A or B. And there's actually really good information in the course about how to achieve that as well. So just to kind of fly through some of these questions, because I know we've only got about 10 minutes left and there's loads. So a few question. Anonymous ND asks, for those who are normally in a teaching role but for whatever reason are not teaching at the time of taking the badge, how is evidence of implementation of UDL in your teaching recorded? Anybody want to answer that one, or will I?
Well, I mean, we talked about having the broad definition of teaching, and even though you might not be teaching a full module, I mean, are you doing an individual session? Would you be doing a training session for colleagues? Something like that you could absolutely use. So you could think about, you know, how am I going to present? So classroom activity in terms of action and expression or engagement. Are you going to design some materials and test them out with some students? Anything that you can do where you can do something. It doesn't have to be a full module. It can be an individual session, a 1 hour training session, something like that.
And I think somebody's asked about, sorry, I've lost the question, but it was in relation to that they won't be teaching lectures, but will be doing tutoring. Absolutely, tutoring is a learning interaction, and you can apply UDL in that context, you know, very successfully. So absolutely, that's fine. So Peggy Dowling, I think she's asked, our modules sent to us. It's a really good practical question. The way it works is that you'll get registered for the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning's Learning Management System. So you receive a login. Once you log in, then the full course is laid out in front of you week by week, and you can engage with the modules direct from the platform. So once you click those online modules, they pop up as a little multimedia pathway. It's very straightforward. You just press next, you press play on the content that has a big play button on it, and it's very kind of guides you through that very, very easily, I think. And somebody's asked, that's the one about tutorials. Perfect.
So somebody asked there about the difference between local and national registration. So local registration will be if you have a peer group facilitator in your local institution, they can share that local registration link with you from the 16th. If you don't have a peer group facilitator, then you can register as part of the national registration, which starts on the 23rd of August. And Gillian asked about is there a restriction in the number of participants? The only restriction really is how many peer group facilitators we will get. So we'd hope to be able to accommodate 1,500 participants on the next national rollout.
So I think what Lisa's saying is we're very, very unlikely to run out of space. So there is a limitations on the numbers, but we don't anticipate there being a problem for the vast majority of people who want to take part. Sinead has asked, can you do the facilitators badge at a later stage? So we're actually just developing a piece for us to enable us to do that. At the moment you can't, but we're hopeful that we might have that available by the autumn, that there might be a piece that's actually outside of the national rollout altogether that people can take at a later stage when at a time that suits them. So let's see, we have, if the course is oversubscribed, would we have to wait till the following October? I think, Paula, hopefully we've cleared that yes, you would from the national rollout perspective if it is oversubscribed, but we don't expect it to be there. But it's also possible that a local facilitator that's in your ETB or in your higher education institution may decide to run their own iteration of the course in between. So as I mentioned, all the course materials are freely available under Creative Commons, and the facilitators have the power to go and roll it out to their colleagues and issue the badges. So there's many of them do that. So as an example, there was, I think, 6 or 7 different locations around the country that ran their own rollouts outside of the national rollout.
So there's just somebody asking there as well, what time are the webinars normally? We normally do them at lunchtime, but they're all recorded and made available to you afterwards, so you don't need to worry. We know lots of people will be teaching or have other commitments at the time of the webinar, so you can absolutely watch them back afterwards.
I see Declan was asked there about he's already completed a teaching and learning course in WIT. Do we think it's appropriate that he would do this program? And I would say absolutely, because like I said, I coordinate to the teaching and learning modules. I think it's very important that you do this course, because as universities and further education, one of the areas that we're working on is access and equal opportunities for everyone. So I think it is a very important element of your continuous professional development, and it is a very important badge and qualification to have, and it can help to encourage your peers as well to do it. And that would be very much from my perspective as well, because I could easily have said, oh, sure, I have it already in my qualification, but I think it's really, really important that you do continue on and do it.
I think what UDL does well, I think Frida kind of mentioned it, that there's a lot of associated practices that people will recognise when they go into this course that they might think of as, they might almost be inclined to say, oh, that is UDL, I'll do UDL that way. Well, what UDL does, I think it gives you a holistic approach to applying these practices and to offering choice for your students appropriately. It gives you the framework to make those decisions with confidence, I think is what I'd say. So Sheila has just asked, is UDL similar to Newell and Gregor's user-sensitive inclusive design methodology? I'm not an expert on this methodology myself, but I do have some familiarity with it. And my understanding, Sheila might correct me in the chat, but my understanding is that that's very much about including users in the design of anything. And in particular, I think it's quite disability focused, if memory serves. So what I'd say is that is a kind of component of UDL, is to build more collaborative experience with your students and to involve your students into the design and delivery of programs. That's some of the checkpoints would talk about that approach. So yes, I suppose it's, again, it's one of those things that's related, but it's not necessarily covering the various. If anybody else has anything to drop in on that, they can do so. Patrick asked, will the course cover assistive technologies and how it can be used with UDL? So I suppose there isn't a massively strong focus, but it is, UDL does have a lot of AT components. And actually, Trevor, you might drop in a link to the AT Hive there into the chat as well, which is a fantastic resource about how to assistive technology, pardon me, with your students. And I suppose UDL has very specific checklist of technologies. And I think in particular, actually, how to prepare your materials to interact with assistive technologies. That's a really strong focus of UDL. But there's definitely assistive technology in there. Anybody else like to add to that, or Trevor, you might comment on that as our AT wizard?
Absolutely. No, I think last year there was 1 or 2 assignments, as far as I remember, where they brought in AT to their UDL assignment. And yeah, so like UDL is about involving everyone and making everyone included, and how materials are delivered and how students are engaging. And where that marries with AT is that it helps the individual to interact with and create as well in this kind of UDL French network of support, really. So yeah, there's the big place for it. And actually David Rose, who, big component, grandfather of UDL practically, he's written a few pieces. So there's definitely quite a few articles out there. So if you email me, I can email you links to a number of AT and UDL resources, and I'll have to share those.
So I see Jessica has asked, is it suitable to do UDL if we continue to teach online next year? Yes, absolutely. Because actually, I think the big flood of interest came from people last year when we actually started to move online. UDL is a non-context specific framework. So what that means is that you can actually apply it in any context. And it's really part of what's really important about UDL is your active engagement in the reflection process, looking at your context for your learners, for your students, and what's the right, even on your own skill sets and how to maximize your own skill set in your context. So I think technology is actually a kind of a stream that underpins UDL, but it's not actually a necessity either. So UDL has no tech, low tech and high tech approaches that you can take to achieve it. Absolutely. So I would say it's very suitable for online or indeed face-to-face. Patrick's asked, what is +1? He's asking for spoilers there. I'm not going to give him too many, just to say that +1 is an approach that makes it easy to begin your UDL journey by focusing adding single additional options at the greatest point of need. But you'll learn more when you come onto the course, Patrick, so I expect to see your name in the registration now. Someone's asked, how is referencing handled when video submissions are made? The video submission is made, you actually submit a kind of a template form to go with your video submission. So there's some detail that you provide us with in the form rather than the actual written submission itself. You're just providing the link to the video, and there's a space there where you can, if you like, add reference. But you can also add it to the end of your video, either in a kind of a slide format, depending on the kind of nature of the video you're putting together.
And actually, there, just even say that UDL
it's all downloadable.
The UDL conference that we had, that all of those videos from all those sessions, that's available, and that became available to the public there only just a few days ago. So I put in the link to our HED UDL conference, and within that you'll see lots of evidence and examples of people bringing in UDL into their teaching practices, and even some about assistive technology as well.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Actually, Trevor, if you don't have the link handy, you might grab as well the link to the case studies, the video case studies, and post them into the chat as well. These are case studies which show what other people have done the course in the past, which makes it maybe easier to kind of feel what actually gets done by people as part of the course. So Rosary's asked, she's an adult guidance counsellor working in the FET sector with clients from different cultural, socioeconomic backgrounds, including asylum seekers. She's really looking forward to how she can redesign guidance interactions to work with these clients. That's great to hear.
The course would be beneficial to recruitment officers. Absolutely, if you're delivering sessions, open days, things like that, it's definitely would be beneficial. And actually all of our colleagues in the UCD Careers Network did the course with us this semester. I found it really beneficial, so yes. Yeah,
so I suppose a lot of the course content we have is kind of, it's delivered by those who are teachers or in a teaching context, so it has that slant on it. But what I would say is that as long as people come into it with an open mind, any kind of learning interaction is involved. I'll give you an example. One person actually, a senior manager who took the course, redesigned their team meetings, their weekly team meetings, because ultimately that is a learning interaction where people are engaged, collaborating and sharing information. So we were very flexible about what that activity that is selected is about, as long as people come in with an open mind around that. See, would learning support resources designed by a library consider as a learning interaction? Absolutely, 100%. Any questions jumping out there? I'm trying to. How does this badge fit into the national framework? I presume Linda is referring to the professional development framework. If not, Linda, maybe you might clarify in the chat, but if you're referring to the National Forums Professional PD framework, it absolutely slots right in, because all of the badges, the open badges in the forums open badge ecosystem are in relation to domains of the framework. So the UDL badge sits and runs across 2 of those domains. So if you're kind of working yourself to actually develop your skill set against the framework, then this badge will absolutely help you in that. Caroline has asked, I work in a centre for people with intellectual disability, and I was wondering if there'd be a peer facilitator who might have a specific insight into material design and presentation. It's the technical side of the production of the material rather than the content I would need support with. Any ideas there, guys?
So, sure, really.
And I think maybe it's Caroline asking about the technical side of accessibility. Is that maybe, Caroline, you could flesh it out for us a bit more in the chat? But if it's around that, like there's lots of resources around accessibility and the technical approaches to that in terms of designing your learning materials, your PowerPoints to make them engaging and digitally accessible from a technical perspective. They come as resources as part of the course. They're not in the core learning materials, but then they're in the resources to explore. So maybe that's answering the question. But if not, feel free to drop in a follow-up.
And AHEAD have developed amazing resources, I have to say, around accessible documents, accessible presentations, accessible videos, with really good instructions about things like how to put captions on your videos and make sure that everything's accessible. So all of those resources are there.
I think we're coming to the end of our questions. There is one saying, are all drop-ins within working hours? So we've scheduled them all at lunchtimes. Be basically on consultation. That was gathered as the same as the most sort of suitable place to go. I should say the drop-ins aren't mandatory. They're not a mandatory part of the course. They're just open there. They're sort of like office hours, that's so people can just drop in if they're struggling a bit, ask a question. But if there is a problem and we'll always take questions. Our peer group facilitator is a great place to start to take questions. If you can't make one of the drop-ins and you have a burning question to ask. I think that's probably coming to the end. I think that might be pretty much everything.
So there's plenty of links in there. So I put in the link there as well to the UDL badge participants and their videos about how they implemented UDL.
Great, so we'll wrap up.
That's again, we're only 3 minutes left. I think we're probably, and just a huge.
So, Darry, your sound is just coming in and out there a little bit.
I didn't hear you come. I think we're going to wrap up. It's huge.
We're losing Darry.
Go ahead, guys.
Yes, so thanks, William, to everybody for attending. As we said, we'll send out the captioned video the royal way, so that will be Trevor. Thanks, William, for attending. If you've got any follow-up questions at all, don't hesitate to get in touch. And a special thanks to Frida for giving her time to come and talk at the session today as well. It was great.